What's going on in Kansas is it's pretty crazy, it seems to me. Yesterday, we were reporting on this program that Chad Taylor, the, well, I don't know if he was the former Democratic candidate in Kansas, had pulled out of the race, basically leaving the race to incumbent Republican Senator Pat Roberts and independent candidate Greg Orman, who is may or may not, it seems more likely than not to caucus with the Democrats, leaving Orman in a very good shape to beat Pat Roberts. But then the Secretary of State apparently reversed himself and decided to say, I'm not going to let him off the ballot.
Right. Secretary of State, by the way, Chris Kobach, who's a partisan, as partisan a hack as it gets, but also is the chairman of Roberts' campaign. Where have we seen this story before? Secretary of State, chairman of somebody's campaign?
Sounds like Ohio to me.
I've heard of it in Ohio. There was that Catherine Harris person.
Florida, that's right.
What did she do? Yeah, this is why the fact that this is still allowed to happen, that somebody who oversees elections is allowed to get involved in partisan elections, is ridiculous. And you'd think that we'd learn from that. But getting beyond the idiocy that is Chris Kobach, there's a lot going on here in general. And that decision of his is going to be challenged in court. We'll get to that. But essentially, you had Chad Taylor, who is a Democrat, a very right-wing Democrat. It's Kansas, but still, you can do better than him. And it turns out that the independent, who is not a guy that you and I would be ecstatic about, or most listeners here, I think, but certainly from a state like Kansas, you would be. He's pro-choice. He's for background checks. He's for comprehensive immigration reform. And he thinks Citizens United was a terrible decision. Well, somebody from Kansas who believes those things as a senator is somebody I can support. I don't expect New York, when it's someone like Cuomo in New York, it's one thing. I don't expect Kansas to send the same thing, to all public offices I do in California or I do in New York or Massachusetts. And so the story was Orman had been a Democrat a while back, but left, got screwed over by the local Kansas Democratic Party. If I could tell you how many times I've seen local Democratic parties screw over people, but that's a conversation for another time. So he left the party. He's an independent. He's been running. And the thing is that in Kansas, it's basically, I'd say with the D next to your name, it's as close to impossible as it is, I don't know what I would compare it to. Rick Perry remembering three things.
There has not been a Democratic senator from Kansas since the eve of the Civil War. What? No, was it 32? I thought it was the eve of the Civil War. It's 32. Oh, really?
But
sure about that?
The beginning of the New Deal is pretty close.
Well, yes.
Not really, but close enough. We're talking about something that 80 years ago was the last time they voted for a Democratic president was LBJ in 64, and essentially LBJ had to win basically every state almost to win Kansas. It just doesn't, they're just hardwired against pulling the lever for anybody with a D next to their name. Obviously, Kathleen Sebelius got elected there as governor twice, so it can happen, but it doesn't happen very often, particularly the federal office. So it was going to be hard for this guy anyhow, very hard. And so, and then you have to add in some other factors. The polling was being done, and you had a number of election experts, Sam Wang being one of them, of Princeton, and others who were like, there's in three-way polling here, what you're seeing is that everybody hates Roberts. Roberts is basically like the herpes of Kansas. He's got like 27% approval rating there. 27%. So these two other guys were splitting the anti-Roberts vote. The guy doesn't even live in the state. He at once slipped up and said, I'll have to get a house back in the state on the air. So besides being older than Methuselah, he also doesn't actually live there and is dumb enough to admit it. And
Taylor has no money, right? Part of the problem with my understanding is that Taylor has basically no money.
Taylor has $6,000 in the bank. I could better fund my campaign right now than he was doing, whereas Orman has two things going.
Cliff Schecter throws his hat in the ring.
Oh, God, no. But thank you. That was fun. But I've seen too much to ever be that dumb, Sam. But Orman, first of all, had raised 600,000 something, which put him up to. I mean, Roberts, I don't think, if I remember correctly, hasn't been a great fundraiser either. So he may have like 2 million or something like an incumbent, but Orman's done a really good job as an independent raising money, and has had no party committees or any, PACs or anything behind him, which of course super PACs, which will change now. But in addition to that, he's independently wealthy. He could dump $1 million in this race. He's run a number of businesses and could dump $1 million into this race anytime he wants. So, and of course, better than everything I just said is that this is the home state of Koch Industries. And just think for a second. I want everyone listening to relax and close your eyes. Let the schadenfreude flow a little bit through you, like a warm bath. Just feel it. And feel if the Democrats were to hold on to the majority by winning the seat with an independent in the Koch brothers state.
That would be pretty funny.
Oh,
that would be pretty funny.
Be awesome.
And here's, I mean, there's a couple other things there. One, Josh Marshall has a theory basically that it doesn't even matter if Taylor's name gets off the ballot, because ultimately, if Orman's going to win, he's going to win big enough that it's not going to make that much of a difference.
I agree with that theory. Let me say quickly, an important thing to compare it to is 2006, when it happened the other way around, sadly, when we had Ned Lamont as a Democratic nominee in Connecticut, Joe Lieberman, don't get me started, running as an independent, and you had a Republican. And basically, the Republicans knew that there's no way their guy was going to win, so they went out and told everybody to vote for Lieberman.
Right.
And it worked, and Lieberman won for a variety of other reasons we won't get into too. But the point is here is that if with the money Orman's going to have, with the party money that the DNC, DSCC, independent PACs, and others will have, there's plenty of money, even if they keep Chad Taylor's name on there, to tell people vote for Orman if you want X, Y, and Z. You want to keep, you want to stop the Senate from outlawing women's reproductive rights, vote for, that kind of thing. So you've got that. On top of that, hell, Chad Taylor himself can come out and endorse him and go places and speak and say you have to vote for him, which my guess is if he was willing to get out of the race, there's a good chance he would do so. Yeah, it might siphon off some votes, and it probably will, but I agree with Josh Marshall. I mean, the two-way polling, when they did these three-way polls, when they did a two-way poll, Orman was up by 10 points on Roberts.
Wow.
So we're going to have some more polls in the coming days. But, I mean, this is a guy, again, with a 27% approval rating. I mean, he was only getting like 30, something percent. In the two-way poll, he was only getting like 33 or 34%. So, I mean, I mean, anybody doesn't think that this is a huge opportunity. And again, in such a conservative state, I mean, it's like a gift. And the fact that Republicans are already freaking out, they're going to have to spend a lot of money there, and there is the chance, because Orman has claimed he went to the people in Kobach's office, asked them exactly what he had to do to drop out. They gave him the exact directions. He did it. They let him off the ballot. Now Kobach's reversing himself. If that is true, maybe we'll be able to take Mr. Kobach to court and see if we can't get him in some trouble.
And I think NBC is reporting that as of Friday, they had spoken to Kobach, and Kobach said, yeah, he's off the ballot. But nevertheless, the other aspect of this is the implications for the Brownback race, because now you have Democrats in Kansas no longer have to even pay any lip service to putting in resources into the Taylor campaign. They can go full force at Sam Brownback, who is also incredibly unpopular, because this guy.
Yeah, Paul Davis is ahead of him. The guy challenging him is now up by, I don't remember what it was,
5 or 6 points, I think. And
yeah, and the other thing is that this group of I mean, there's been that's what a lot of what people read What's the Matter with Kansas. Back when Tom Frank wrote that book, he was talking for a while in there about the suburbs where a lot of these moderate Republicans had been, and there's been a huge war between the crazy people like Brownback and Roberts. Used to maybe be closer to the moderates. He was sort of a traditional conservative, but he, of course, has embraced all the craziness because he needed to head off a Tea Partier. And so this group of 70 Republicans, and there's some pretty prominent ones, a former party chair, former state House majority leader, people like that. This group has endorsed both Davis and now Orman. So, I mean, this is real. They're going to have Republicans stumping for them. They're going to have the ability to raise money. Brownback, this place has been like a little lab for Koch Industries, where they've tried their idiotic supply-side economics that has just blown the place up.
And let me be explicit about that, because, I mean, I've talked about it on this program. We talked about Brownback earlier in the summer, but Brownback
I think you and I did, actually, yeah.
Brownback came in, and Arthur Laffer was his chief advisor. He's the guy who developed the Laffer curve, which argues that there is a magic place where if you start taxing, people will just stop working, because if you have too high of a marginal tax rate, it's not worth it for people to work, which of course is I guess it's possible in some instances, but it's largely silly. And maybe that's why Laffer curve. But be that as it may, they went in and they slashed corporate taxes, slashed taxes across the board in Kansas in 2012, and now they're facing record deficits. They've had to cut education.
It's destroyed education.
It has destroyed their bond rating in that state. And recall, just a reminder, people, states cannot print their own currency. They have to have balanced budgets. So this is a real problem for Kansas. And they're, in contrary to what Brownback promised when they did all this magic free market stuff, supply side stuff, their job growth has been lagging around every other state in that region. That's
right. So, I mean, there's a lot that is just fascinating going on there when you combine all that. And I just can't bring myself to decide, if the Democrats were to hold on to the Senate by one seat, if I would want that to be because Mitch McConnell lost or because the Koch brothers lost Kansas. But I could see either of them being the kind of thing, or frankly both of them, that could lead to a very happy evening.
Yes, so, it would be, folks. So now we know the recipe to pleasuring Cliff Schecter.
Oh God.
There it is.
So many things running through my mind to say, and yet I think I'll avoid most of them.
Yes, well, I think that is appreciated by most people listening.